Hi, my name is Susie Hubley, and I'm presenting the service today with a lot of help. Um, the service will explore the place in our consciousness where death and life intersect. Lay-led worship, is a long-standing tradition in our church, and most of our services for the summer are lay-led. Starting in 2 weeks, though, most services will be led by our new minister, the Reverend Donna Dahlham. This week, our offering will be shared with Furniture Friends. Furniture Friends is a local, um, charitable, and community organization that collects donated items and delivers them to refugees and people emerging from homelessness. The organization was nominated by Sam Sherry for our Share the Plate. Our church has a close connection with Furniture Friends, as members have donated household goods and volunteers, including our youth, have distributed furniture to families moving into their new homes. If you'd like to contribute to the offering, you can go to our website and use the donate button at the top of the page. Choose the option to give to the plate. You can also send a check to the church. And finally, a reminder that we'll have our virtual coffee hour at 10:45 this morning. The link for that meeting is on the website. We hope you'll join us. Our words for lighting the chalice are by the Reverend Amy Carol Webb. We light this flame for the art of sacred unknowing. Humbled by all that we cannot fathom in this time, we come into the presence of what we do know, perhaps the only thing that we can ever know, that love is now and forever the only answer to everything and everyone in every moment. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, practice like your hair is on fire. In other words, you never know when death is going to come and get you. So you'd be well advised to meditate and study like crazy in hopes that, with the hope of finally awakening to the true nature of life. Though I've always been impressed and somewhat awed by that saying, I've never really done that on a regular basis. I struggle to maintain a meditation practice. I distanced myself from the Buddhist group that I was involved with since the 90s and was close to for a while. But mindfulness has been on my mind, so to speak, for a long, long time. I was told by a teacher once that enlightenment is the experience of continually being in the present moment. I've aspired to that, but not enough to sit myself down every day or regularly even to train my mind to be in the present moment through meditation. I guess I'm better at aspiring than doing, except for sometimes. I do know the joy of appreciating those small moments. Um, every night in the summer, I go outside to sniff the nicotianas in my garden. They smell like jasmine after dark. It's just heavenly. Um, I was inspired to put this service together by an article titled "What It's Like to Know You're Dying" by a woman named April Nelson, published in the Medium website. The author has lived with cancer for 15 years, and just lately she can tell that her body is telling her that the disease is accelerating its pace. She's not right up against death now, but she can see it waiting. So with this awareness, she's finding that a wall in her consciousness has somehow melted away, and she's experiencing life with a new immediacy and intensity. Her senses seem more acute, and her heart more tender and easily touched. Those experiences and objects that she only half noticed before are suddenly unexplainably dear and beautiful. I was so moved by what she said. I have had glimpses of that world beyond the wall, just glimpses, and I've gotten a good look at death in the past few years, though not my own. Um, my parents both died in the past few years. And while they were both 97 and it was the natural time for their bodies to give out, still, it was the first time I had lost someone I was close to. And having them die made it clear that I could die too. Though I'm in my 70s, I still held on to some of that youthful illusion of immortality up until they died. And that hit me pretty hard. I would wake up and think, oh, another day closer to death. That sounds horrible, but I don't actually think I was depressed. Um, but I wasn't leaping out of bed and greeting the day with sheer delight either. And when I read April Nelson's article, something shifted. Though I hadn't noticed any walls coming down in my consciousness, I started thinking that maybe I could dismantle the wall myself, little by little. I started feeling a need to go back to my Buddhist practices of meditation and mindfulness in everyday life. Though enlightenment didn't knock me over with a single blow, um, I thought I would start cultivating it and appreciating those small moments of clarity, which realistically may be all that I or most of us can hope for. I remembered the time I was out walking early in the morning, just before sunrise, and I brushed against a dense, dark bush next to the sidewalk. And from deep within the foliage, I heard the small, slight rustling of a bird waking up. Those moments, the sweetness of those moments just can't really be described. So now I've started meditating again with some regularity. And I've joined a group called Recovery Dharma to support my longtime sobriety. I've also rejoined the Don Redwood meditation group here at church. And it feels really good to be back on the path with like-minded companions. For this service, several congregants have shared information and opened their hearts with me about their experience with death. I'm grateful to them, and I've learned from them. Today we present recorded reflections from three of those generous people: Barbara Murray, Mike Luce, and John Howard.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the air, giving life the shape of justice.
Good morning. My name is John Howard. This topic, facing death, both attracts and repels me. I thought, what a great topic. But then every time I would start, I would quickly become overwhelmed by the vastness of it. And yet, once considered, I couldn't seem to let it go. We think of time as the past, the present, and the future. Do other animals do this? We can't really know. But clearly, in my life, there is now more past than future. A lot more. It has always been natural to put all the responsibility of making my mark and legacy into the future. What I'd like to do, to contribute, to understand before I die. There will come a point when the question will have to be, what have I done, rather than what will I do? There's one camp that believes this contemplation of mortality is very beneficial. The Greek Stoics believed something like this, and Carlos Castaneda's sage Don Juan. My favorite example is Scrooge, as played by Alastair Sim in the 1951 film version of A Christmas Carol. His giddy and totally convincing conversion upon waking Christmas morning to find that he is still alive will always suggest to me that it's never too late to learn the secret of joyful living. But then there's the other camp that believes the awareness of death is intolerable and catastrophic, and that most people do not have the courage to face it. They say that very few can exist without cultural constructs to protect them from this horror, such as belief in an afterlife or addiction or pursuit of wealth, all of which are forms of denial and maybe insanity. With the dropping of the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, we became the first animal capable of suicide as a species. And with climate change, we are poised to bring other species along with us to extinction. Courageous contemplation of this truth might be the only way to change direction, but few seem ready to do it, and the subliminal hopelessness shows up in dysfunctional families and failed presidencies. What does it mean to be ready for death? Will I ever learn the secret of joyful living? And if I do, will there be any time left to enjoy it? Will I ever get rid of all this clutter so that they don't have to hire a dumpster when I'm dead? And can I make all the amends that are needed so I can be at peace with no regrets? Most of the time, I tend to agree with Katharine Hepburn, who in her autobiographical documentary, All About Me, said that she wasn't afraid of death. She thought it would be like a long sleep and nothing to worry about. Restful, in fact. Most of the time, I don't worry about getting graded at the end. I believe increasing wisdom brings increasing forgiveness and gratitude, but maybe not. And my 3 minutes are up, so I'll just have to end it there.
A young Ernest Hemingway, badly injured by an exploding shell on a World War I battlefield, wrote in a letter home that dying is a very simple thing. I've looked at death, and really I know. If I should have died, it would have been quite the easiest thing I've ever done. Years later, Hemingway adapted his own experience, that of the soul leaving the body, taking flight, then returning, for his famous short story, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, about an African safari gone disastrously wrong. The protagonist, stricken by gangrene, knows he is dying. Suddenly his pain vanishes, and then Compy, a bush pilot, arrives to rescue him. The two take off and fly through a storm so thick it was like flying through a waterfall until the plane emerges into light. Before them, unbelievably white in the shining sun, was the square top of Kilimanjaro, and then he knew that that was where he was going. The description embraces elements of a classic near-death experience: the darkness, the cessation of pain, the emerging into light, and then a feeling of peacefulness. I used to read stories like this to our dear Betsy Parsons when I visited her first at her home, then at the Cedars, and then at the Gosnell house where she finally passed away. The stories I read to her changed over time as she gradually came to accept that she was, in her words, going home. Betsy was very interested in my own near-death experiences, since she knew I had gone home ahead of her. She found listening to my experiences and the resulting impact upon my life deeply healing and nourishing. Knowing that I have no more fear of death, and found being in a different state of existence to be one of experiencing no pain, absolute love and compassion, freedom from the limitations of the body, in other words, pure bliss. I had no desire to return to my body. I just had no more connection with it other than deep gratitude. Betsy asked if I had missed my loved ones. I responded that I sensed no loss, just sweetness for their love. Betsy then asked how the actual crossing of the threshold from life to death was. I said it was immediate. One moment I was in one state of being, and in a millisecond later, another state of being. There was no pain and no fear. It was frankly hardly noticeable. Betsy then asked, "What did you do while you were dead?" I laughed uproariously and said nothing. I had just experienced the bliss. She asked if I had ever been a hippie, because that sounded like hippie karma. We laughed when I said I was too young when hippies were at the height of expressing their collective karma. I missed the whole thing. She asked if we were eternal, and I responded that we are. She asked if I believed in reincarnation, and I responded with a resounding yes, since I have visited my other lives, both past and future. We sighed and agreed that we would like to reincarnate together again. Have no fear of death, dear souls. Death is beautiful.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding us. There is a rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding us. There is a rest in this love. There is a rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this love.
Good morning. My name is Mike Luce. The name of my piece is The Shop Process. A number of years ago, I took up woodworking as part of my emotional salvage and protection program. It's a practice which has provided me with all kinds of rewards over the years. When I'm in the shop, contemplation morphs into meditation. Your thoughts leave yourself alone for a while. I'll be talking about a couple of the urns I've made here, but if you're interested, when I made my mother's casket, the process was recorded for radio by a student at the Maine Center for Documentary Studies. It's now in the prx.org archives. You can search my name with the title Bringing the Work In to find it. Whatever it is I'm making, I find myself envisioning the person who's going to end up with it, whether or not I know just who that's going to be. If it's a bureau for furniture friends, I'll have my own image of a recipient using the bureau. If it's a spoon for the holiday fare, I see that being used in some soup. As I work on an urn, well, I sure don't have to make up anything for that. There's a flow to the progress of things, which I think shapes my own processing, as well as that of the urn. When I start, I just have some wood on the bench in front of me. The wood has its own character, just like the person whose ashes will be residing there. Each tells me a little bit about what to do, how to proceed. I think about the dimensions. I think about character. Sometimes the person's being seems to have a shape which is just right for it. I can't explain really how that works. That's just how my brain works. Sometimes, once in particular, a certain piece of wood in my rack will step forward. That was for a client of mine when I worked in community mental health. He had a peculiar and enjoyable kind of character. The board had a wild grain and he had a wild side himself. Spent a lot of time with that board just sitting on the bench. We had a conversation of sorts, his way of talking, his way of looking at the world, his care for living things, his tastes, his love for all things natural, all extreme. Then one day I knew what to do, and the urn came together from raw board to fully formed urn, ready for finish in a day. I knew when I was done that this was his urn, not just an urn. The best part, though, other than that his wife really loved it, was that I had a chance to interact with him when he was no one's mental health client, just a guy I knew. A few years before that, my cousin Timmy passed from this life. We hadn't seen each other all that often in adulthood, and in a lot of ways we were very different people. I had always liked Timmy. He was a hard-scrabble, stereotypical backwoods man. He would have fit right into a Carolyn Shute novel. He was a man very much of his locality up in rural western Maine, with a rough, do-it-yourself independence and a disdain for all authority which might in some way impinge on his life. We were not aligned politically, but Timmy was most of all a nice guy. This was a number of years ago, you remember, back when your politics didn't tinge or preclude most everything else. By spending time with the urn, I was able to spend time with Timmy in a way I wouldn't have otherwise. Right off, I knew his urn was going to be a local oak. It's a tough, opinionated wood with a strong grain, and you have to respect it. And that was Timmy. His urn was very plain and utilitarian, because he was not a man into frippery. All I carved into the wood was his name and dates. Whenever I've had the opportunity to do something like this, I've felt a blessing was added to my life, especially now when we can't even grieve in traditional ways. I'm grateful for the times when I've been able to spend times like this. There have even been occasions when, although I wasn't making an urn for someone who had passed, I found myself planning what I might have done. My own take on virtual, I guess. My shop is my safe space to grieve. Everyone should have one.
This ends today's service. As I extinguish the chalice, I'd like to again say a heartfelt thank you to those who helped me with this and whose hard work and generosity made it possible. Thank you.